Kevin woke up gasping for air. Someone's hand was gripping his throat. He opened his eyes and saw him. "I could kill you, but you don't deserve it." And in that moment, Kevin realized that his nightmare had only just begun. In the suburbs of Chicago, there were plenty of places frequented by those who had nothing to lose. One such establishment was Hank's Place, a rundown bar with dim neon signs and the lingering stench of cheap booze soaked into its wooden walls. No one asked questions here. Bartenders didn't interfere in conflicts, and if someone left through the back door before making it to the front, it was forgotten by the next evening. Under the dim glow of a lamp, a man sat at the bar. Tall, solidly built, but with the posture of someone accustomed to being invisible. A short haircut, a faded leather jacket, deep lines on his forehead. His eyes, tired, yet watchful, like a predator used to the hunt. He drank his whiskey slowly, with the kind of cold-blooded composure that would have unsettled anyone who knew what to look for. But the four guys in leather jackets didn't know. They burst into the bar the way they always did, loud, cocky, putting on a show, like a pack of street jackals. Their leader, Kevin, was tall, broad-shouldered, a blonde with the smirk of a man who had spent his life taking what he wanted and had never encountered real resistance. Behind him were three more, a redhead with a rough face, a stocky Latino with a chain around his neck, and a lanky guy with a crooked grin. They weren't looking for trouble. They were trouble. Kevin lazily scanned the bar, as if picking a target, but the choice was obvious. The one sitting alone was always the easiest prey. He stepped closer, slapping his palm on the wooden counter. "Hey, buddy," Kevin smirked, leaning in. "Looks like you're in our seat." The man didn't answer right away. He took another sip of whiskey, set the glass down, and slowly turned his head. "Find another seat." His voice was steady, calm. No challenge, no fear. And that was exactly what should have set them on edge, but it didn't. "What did you just say?" the redhead asked, stepping forward. "Mistake." It all happened too fast. The man sprang up like a coiled spring, grabbed the redhead's wrist, and twisted it in one sharp motion. A sickening crack echoed through the bar. The redhead let out a howl of pain and collapsed to his knees, staring in horror at his hand, now bent at an unnatural angle. But it still wasn't over. The second guy lunged forward, only to be met with a brutal elbow strike to the solar plexus. A choked gasp. His body doubled over, and he crumpled to the floor, desperately sucking in air. The bar fell silent. Kevin and the last guy froze, fear twisting their faces. Only now did they realize that they hadn't just picked the wrong man to mess with. They had made a catastrophic mistake. The stranger didn't even look angry. He calmly wiped his hands with a napkin, as if just ridding himself of something unpleasant. Then he looked at them. "You chose the wrong opponent." Kevin swallowed hard. A wave of raw, primal panic rose inside him, clawing at his chest. A second later, they bolted for the door, stumbling and shoving each other like cornered rats. The stranger remained in his seat. The bartender glanced at him but didn't say a word. He had long since learned one rule. There was only one truly dangerous kind of person in this bar, the one who stayed calm when trouble started. In an abandoned garage on the outskirts of the city, the air was thick with the smell of motor oil, dampness, and cheap cigarettes. Three men sat in the corner, beaten, shaken, and nowhere near as confident as they had been just a few hours ago. The redhead, his hand now wrapped in a makeshift bandage, hissed in pain. The stocky Latino stared at the floor. The lanky one fidgeted nervously with the hem of his jacket. Only Kevin was trying to keep his composure. But even he could feel the anger boiling inside him. "Is he some kind of special forces or what?" The redhead spat through gritted teeth, clutching his broken wrist. "What the hell even happened?" "I don't care who he is," Kevin exploded. His fists clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. Never before had he been humiliated like this. Never. He was the one who broke people, not the other way around. He was the one who decided who was in charge. But that bastard. He hadn't even looked at them when he wiped his hands clean. Kevin could feel something churning inside him, like an avalanche on the verge of collapse. "We need to deal with him," he muttered through clenched teeth. "We'll bring in Mike. He'll bring his crew." Mike was the solution to every problem. A fixer with ties to the local mafia, a man with connections, guns, and people willing to get their hands dirty for the right price. If someone needed a random accident, if someone had to be found, if someone wasn't supposed to breathe anymore, Mike knew how to make it happen. Kevin wasn't about to let this slide. 3 hours later, Kevin returned to Hank's place. This time he wasn't alone. 6 bruisers followed him in. Heavy boots, leather jackets, dull, mean stares. Mike walked in the center, massive, bald, with dark eyes that belonged to a man who had seen too much and cared too little. But the bar was empty. No sign of the man. The bartender stood behind the counter, wiping a glass as usual. He didn't even glance up. "Shit," Mike exhaled, scanning the room. The feeling that they'd been too late was unbearable. "You sure he's not a cop?" he asked, turning to Kevin. Kevin clenched his jaw. "What does it matter? He humiliated us." Mike stared at him for a long moment. "What if humiliation is the least of your problems?" His voice was different this time, flat, emotionless, but with a weight behind it that made Kevin freeze. "Do you even know who you picked a fight with?" Mike pulled out his phone, played a video, security camera footage from the bar, the same few seconds, everything happening too fast. The stranger lifts his head. A swift move, snap, a broken wrist. Another guy drops, writhing on the floor from a brutal solar plexus strike. The others freeze in terror. But the most terrifying part wasn't in the video. It was in the comments beneath it. "That's Logan Ryan, former operative of the Black Ravens. Those psychos kill without hesitation. Run, guys, just run." A cold, paralyzing chill ran down Kevin's spine. His hands went numb. His muscles tensed. The name. It meant something. The Black Ravens. He had heard of them. Whispers, stories, rumors of off-the-books operations, of men who left no witnesses behind. But everyone thought they didn't exist anymore. So why was he here? And why, out of everyone, had they picked him as their target? For the first time in his life, Kevin felt real fear. Kevin hadn't slept all night. He lay in the darkness, staring at the ceiling. But even when he closed his eyes, the scene from the bar played over and over in his mind. The sickening crack of breaking bone, the gasping breath of a man collapsing to the floor, desperately clawing for air. The calm voice. "You chose the wrong opponent." He tossed and turned in bed, angry, trying to convince himself it was all in his head, that everything was under control. But the more he tried to reassure himself, the harder it became to ignore the unease curling in his gut. Cold, sticky, like poison. By morning, he started to understand. This wasn't over. When the first rays of sunlight slipped through the blinds, Kevin finally got out of bed, his body feeling like it had been weighed down with lead. He stepped outside and felt it immediately. Someone was waiting for him. Across the street, a car sat parked. A simple, unremarkable black Charger, its headlights off, its windows tinted. It didn't move, but Kevin knew someone was inside, watching. At first he wanted to tell himself it was a coincidence, but then he remembered the calls. Around midnight, his phone had rung. He answered. Silence. Whoever was on the other end didn't speak. They just listened. Kevin's fingers clenched into a fist before he could stop himself. What the hell is going on? By midday, he tried calling his guys. The first didn't answer. The redhead, the one whose wrist had been twisted like a broken toy, straight to voicemail. Kevin sent a text. No reply. 3 hours passed. He tried the second guy, the one who had stood near the exit of the bar. More dial tones, more silence. This time, his stomach turned. Then, an hour later, a message came in from one of his contacts. Kev, found your guy's car. Headlights smashed, door wide open, but he's not there. Cold. Real, merciless, suffocating cold. This wasn't a coincidence. They hadn't just vanished. Someone had taken them. Kevin sat down in his chair and buried his face in his hands. His fingers were shaking. He couldn't deny the truth anymore. That man was coming for them, methodically, silently, without unnecessary words. This wasn't just about revenge. This was a hunt. Kevin had never seen himself as prey, but now he knew he was. And there was only one question left. When would he come for him? Kevin had become a stranger in his own city. In just 3 days, he lost everything. The redhead never came back. The Latino stopped answering his phone. The lanky one vanished without a word. Even Mike, the guy who could fix any problem, called him and said just one thing. I'm not getting involved. No one is. Are you serious? Kevin tried to keep his voice steady, but he failed. You screwed up, kid. Mike's voice was devoid of emotion, just tired. There are people you don't mess with. He's one of them. You always said there's a way to handle things. Some things can't be handled. Good luck. Click. Kevin was alone. On the third night, he fell asleep in his clothes, gripping a gun in his hand. But when he opened his eyes, his fingers were empty, and a cold, steel-like grip was wrapped around his throat. Kevin couldn't breathe. Through blurred, panicked vision, he saw Logan, sitting on the edge of the bed, holding his throat effortlessly, almost casually. Kevin jerked, struggling to break free. Pointless. Logan wasn't even squeezing. He was simply showing him who was in control. I could kill you, Logan said, his voice calm. No threat, no hatred, just a fact. But you don't deserve it. Kevin trembled. He nodded desperately, gasping for air. Logan studied him, like a predator deciding whether to kill or let go. You're just a pathetic little thief who thought he was a gangster. Each word hit like a punch. You thought you could scare people. Kevin tried to speak. He couldn't. His throat was too tight. Logan leaned in closer. But you picked the wrong target. Slowly, he released his grip. Kevin collapsed onto his side, sucking in air, chest heaving like a fish dumped onto dry land. By the time he looked up, Logan was already at the door. He turned back. If I ever see you in this city again, you disappear. No anger, no emotion, just a simple, undeniable truth. Kevin didn't argue. He knew Logan meant it. The next morning, he was gone. No bags, no goodbyes. He just got in his car and vanished. No one ever heard from Kevin again. The bar went back to normal. The bartender kept wiping glasses, like always. The customers drank, like always. And Logan just went back to his whiskey, as if nothing had happened. And now no one ever dared to sit across from him. The end.